The morning sun was only beginning to rise over the dusty Arizona land when Elias Carter stepped out of the small wooden stable behind the general store. The air was cool, and a soft wind carried the smell of dry earth, horses, and early morning coffee drifting from the local saloon. Elias stretched his shoulders slowly, feeling the weight of another long day of work. He wasn't a man who chased trouble. He simply repaired saddles, cleaned stables, delivered supplies, and helped whoever needed help. That was enough for him. Elias had lived in the town of Red Creek for years. Most people knew he was calm, patient, and someone they could trust. He didn't drink much, didn't gamble, and didn't start fights. Yet whenever danger came, he acted fast and without hesitation. No one fully understood why a man so quiet had such steady nerves, but Elias never explained it. He believed that people did not need to know his past to see the man he tried to be. That morning, after brushing dust off his shirt, he picked up a saddle that needed stitching. He placed it on a wooden stand outside, enjoying the fresh air as he threaded his needle. The town was just beginning to wake up. A shopkeeper swept dust off the porch, a young boy chased a chicken across the road, and the blacksmith hammered softly inside his workshop. Elias preferred mornings like this, quiet, normal, simple. He did not know that within minutes everything would shift. Down the dirt road, a small group of Apache travelers approached. They came peacefully, carrying woven baskets, pottery, and goods to trade. At the front rode Chief Tahoma, a respected elder known for his fairness and wisdom. Beside him walked a few younger men and women, guiding horses loaded with supplies. They often passed through Red Creek to exchange goods for tools, blankets, or flour. Most townsfolk respected them, and things usually went smoothly. But that morning, something was different. Elias noticed at first a strange tension in the air. Two unfamiliar horses were tied near the saloon. The animals looked restless, stamping their hooves. Horses usually reflected the mood of their riders. Elias paused his work and scanned the street quietly. He wasn't the type to assume the worst, but he trusted his instincts, and they rarely lied. Chief Tahoma's group reached the center of the town, calling out greetings. The blacksmith waved. A few traders smiled. Then, from the saloon's swinging doors, three rough-looking strangers stepped out. Elias didn't know their names, but he recognized the tight men who traveled from town to town, looking for quick money and faster trouble. Their hands stayed near their belts, and their eyes followed the Apache travelers in a way Elias did not like. He folded the saddle open, pretending to continue stitching while keeping his attention sharp. He didn't jump into things unless truly needed, but he also didn't ignore signs of danger. Chief Tahoma signaled for his people to prepare the goods. They set their baskets on the ground. Ready to trade? At that moment, one of the strangers spoke loudly, his voice sharp like broken glass. Looks like they're carrying something worth taking. Leah stiffened. A few townsfolk turned, uneasy. The Apache group heard the comment but stayed calm. They had been tested before by men who didn't understand them. Chief Tahoma placed a hand on the shoulder of a younger member, warning him silently not to react. But the stranger stepped closer. The second stranger, who seemed the leader, lifted a hand as if claiming the goods. "That pottery will fetch a good price," he said with an ugly grin. "I say you hand it over." Elias put down the saddle slowly. He felt the wind stop for a moment, as if the whole town held its breath. Chief Tahoma spoke in a steady voice. "We came to trade, not to fight. Trade." The stranger laughed. "No, we're taking it." He moved his hand toward his belt. Elias acted without thinking, the way someone acts when they have practiced calm bravery for many years. He walked forward with steady steps. "That's enough," Elias said, his voice calm but strong. The strangers turned. They didn't know him. They didn't know that when Elias spoke like that, people usually listened. "Mind your business, cowboy," the leader snapped. "This is my business," Elias answered quietly. "This is my town." And they came here peacefully. Something in his tone made the youngest stranger hesitate, but the leader didn't. He narrowed his eyes and moved faster toward his weapon. The next moments happened quickly, yet without chaos. Elias didn't make dramatic moves. He simply reached for the revolver at his hip the moment the stranger tried to draw his own. His motion was clean, controlled, and practiced. The sound of metal brushing leather filled the air. A few light cracks echoed across the street. Not wild or loud, just sharp enough to break the tension. Dust lifted from the ground where shots struck near the stranger's boots. Elias didn't aim to harm anyone. He only aimed to stop the trouble. His warning was clear. He would not let them hurt peaceful travelers. The strangers froze. They realized too late that the quiet cowboy was far quicker than he looked. The leader stumbled backward, dropping his revolver in surprise. He wasn't injured, just shaken by how fast Elias had reacted. The other two raised their hands, not wanting the situation to grow worse. The townsfolk rushed to help, making sure the strangers backed away from the Apache traders. Chief Tahoma signaled his people to stay still, letting the moment settle. Elias kept his revolver lowered, but ready until the strangers mounted their horses and hurried out of town. It ended as quickly as it began. No injuries, no violence, just a strong warning delivered by a man who didn't crave trouble but refused to let wrong things happen. When the dust settled, quiet returned to Red Creek. A few people whispered to each other, remembering that Elias Carter was not just a stable worker. He was someone you wanted on your side when things went wrong. Chief Tahoma walked toward Elias with calm dignity. His eyes held deep gratitude. "You protected my people," the chief said softly. "I just didn't want anyone getting hurt," Elias replied, sliding his revolver back into his holster. "They came here in peace." "That should mean something." "It means more than you know," the chief answered. A crowd gathered around, but everyone kept respectful distance. A few of the Apache women lifted their baskets again, relieved but still surprised. One of them stood slightly apart from the others. She was young, not a child, but not much older than her early 20s. Her name was Ayla, a quiet woman known for her skill in weaving and her gentle nature. Her long, dark hair fell in a loose braid over her shoulder, and she looked at Elias with a curious expression, as if seeing something unexpected in him. Chief Tahoma glanced toward her, then back at Elias. He took a deep breath before speaking again. "In our way," the chief began, "when someone protects our family with true courage, a deep honor must be given. It is not only a thank you, it is a bond." Elias felt a knot form in his stomach. He respected their culture deeply and didn't want to break any tradition, but he also didn't want anyone to misunderstand his intentions. "What kind of honor?" Elias asked gently. The chief turned to Ayla. She lowered her eyes shyly, but did not look away completely. "I offer you the right to take Ayla into your home," the chief said with full sincerity. "Not as a possession, not as a reward, but as someone who would be safe with you, someone you have proven worthy to protect." The entire town fell silent. Elias' cheeks turned warm with surprise. Elias was stunned. He had expected gratitude, but not this. Not something so serious, so meaningful. He understood this was not a small gesture. It was something rooted deeply in their cultural respect. He looked at Ayla. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't forced. But she was uncertain, her life hanging on the edge of a choice made by others. Elias inhaled slowly. "Chief," he said, his voice quiet and full of respect, "your offer is an honor, truly, but I cannot accept." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Chief Tahoma frowned, not offended but confused. "Do you refuse her?" Elias shook his head quickly. "No, I refuse the idea of choosing for her. Allah should decide her own future. She should not be given to someone because of a debt." Allah lifted her eyes in surprise. No one had ever spoken for her choice like that. The chief studied Elias for a long moment. The cowboy's honesty shone clear as the sunlight, clean, calm, and unselfish. Finally, the chief nodded slowly. "You speak with respect," he said, "and perhaps with more wisdom than many." His eyes met Elias's for a brief second, full of quiet gratitude and something else, curiosity. The moment passed, but something had changed. Elias stepped back, letting the Apache travelers prepare to leave. He believed the matter was settled. But fate had different plans. The cowboy had refused the offer. But life was not done weaving the story that would tie him and Allah together in ways he'd never expected. The next morning in Red Creek began like any other sunlight, stretching over rooftops, dust floating gently across the road, and people starting their day with slow, familiar routines. Elias Carter walked out of the stable with a bucket of feed, ready to tend to the horses before repairing wagons for the day. He assumed everything would return to normal after yesterday's tense moment. The strangers had ridden off, the Apache group had left peacefully, and life, he believed, would go back to its quiet rhythm. He didn't expect anything unusual. Elias liked things simple, but life had other ideas. While brushing a chestnut mare, he heard footsteps approaching the stable. At first, he thought it was the shopkeeper or a townsboy coming to ask for help. But when he turned around, he froze not from fear, but sheer surprise. Standing a few feet away was Ayla. She wore the same modest clothing from the day before, her long braid resting over her shoulder, but her presence carried a quiet strength that hadn't been as visible earlier. She wasn't standing with her people. She wasn't escorted. She was alone. Elias blinked in confusion, unsure if he should speak first. Ayla looked around shyly before stepping closer. "I came to thank you," she said in a soft but steady voice. Elias set the brush down. "You don't owe me thanks, really. I only did what anyone should do." Ayla shook her head gently. "Not everyone does what is right, even when they should." Her words were simple, but they settled deeply in the space between them. A few townsfolk walking by slowed their steps, surprised to see an Apache woman standing calmly in the cowboy's stable. Some whispered quietly. Others simply watched with curiosity. Ayla noticed, but did not show discomfort. She looked as if she had prepared herself for the attention. Elias wiped his hands on a cloth, trying to understand why she was here alone. "Did Chief Tahoma send you?" he asked politely. Ayla shook her head. "No, I asked to come." He agreed. Elias felt a small knot inside loosen. He didn't want her to be forced into anything, not even visiting. "I'm glad it was your choice," he said. Ayla offered a small smile, gentle, unsure, but sincere. Elias realized it was the first time he'd seen her smile at all. "I wanted to see the town for myself," she said. "And I wanted to speak to you." Elias nodded, feeling uncertain but respectful. "Then I'll show you around." They stepped out of the stable and began walking through the quiet roads of Red Creek. The town wasn't large, but it carried a warm charm when seen slowly. Elias pointed out the blacksmith shop, the small church, the general store, the schoolhouse that sometimes doubled as a meeting hall. People greeted him politely, and Ayla stayed close, listening to everything with calm curiosity. At one point she paused near a row of horses tied beside the well. She moved gently closer to a young bay horse, her hand hovering above its neck without touching. "She likes you," Elias said quietly. Allah looked surprised. "How can you tell?" "Horses show their feelings clearly," he said. "She leaned toward you, not away." Allah finally placed her hand softly on the horse's neck. The animal didn't shy away. Instead, she nuzzled closer. Allah's expression warmed. "Where I come from, animals are friends," she said. "We treat them like family." "You and I think alike," Elias replied. She looked up at him, and for the first time, her eyes showed not confusion or shyness, but a growing trust. They walked farther. Elias showed her the quiet place behind the church where the wind carried a cool breeze, the small garden behind the bakery where the baker's wife grew herbs, and the hill overlooking the town where the entire desert stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Ayla stood on the hill for a long moment, the wind lifting strands of her hair. "This place is quiet, but full," she said. Elias understood what she meant. Red Creek wasn't rich or grand, but it held kindness in small corners, neighbors who shared bread, a sheriff who kept order without cruelty, a town that mostly tried to live in peace. Ayla turned to him again. "You did something unusual yesterday. Upset your chief," Elias said gently, though not regretfully. Ayla shook her head. "No, you spoke truth. You said, my future should be mine. That was not something I expected to hear. Elias looked away, feeling the weight of her words. I just didn't want choices made for you. Alice studied his face quietly. Most people do not think a woman should choose. You did. Elias didn't know what to say. He admired her honesty. He also realized how unusual it must have been for her, someone raised in a culture with traditions, to hear a stranger defend her. Freedom so openly, they walked again. Slower now, the air between them filled with a gentle understanding instead of silence. By midday, the sky darkened slightly. A line of gray clouds moved in from the west. The town was used to sudden weather changes. But this storm came quickly, faster than expected. Within minutes, the wind grew stronger, lifting dust and pushing against doors and windows. Elias looked around with concern. A storm's coming fast. We should get back to shelter. But before they could turn back, a distant cry for help echoed down the main road. Elias didn't think, he simply ran. Ayla followed without hesitation. Down the road. A family's wagon had broken a wheel while trying to leave town before the storm. The father struggled with the heavy load. The mother tried to calm crying children, and strong gusts of wind threatened to tip the wagon. Without a word, Elias jumped into action. He steadied the wagon with his shoulder. Bracing it against the wind, Allah rushed to help the mother gather loose supplies and keep the children under the canvas cover. The storm grew rougher by the minute, but neither Elias nor Allah faltered. They worked as if they had done this many times together. Hand me that plank, Elias called. Ayla grabbed it quickly, her movements swift and sure. She helped him brace the wheel, holding parts steady as he hammered them into place. Wind pushed them hard. Dust filled the air, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Yet both of them stayed focused. At one point, a particularly strong gust nearly knocked the wagon sideways. Elias dug his boots into the ground, pushing his shoulder harder, while Ayla grabbed the reins to keep the horses calm. You're strong, Elias said, impressed. Ayla shook her head. I am used to storms. We face them often at home, together. They repaired the wheel, secured the supplies, and guided the family to the nearest shelter, a large barn built strong enough to withstand rough weather. Inside, as rain began to fall in heavy sheets outside, the family thanked them repeatedly. Elias stepped back shyly, not seeking praise. Allah did the same. When the family was safe, Elias turned to Allah. They didn't speak for a moment. They simply looked at each other, breathless from the effort, hair windswept, clothes dusty but spirits strangely lifted. Ayl finally smiled again, wider this time. We worked well together. Elias nodded. Yes, we did. For the first time, he saw something new in her eyes. Not only trust, but a beginning of understanding, of connection. They walked back toward town once the storm eased into a gentle drizzle. The clouds broke apart, letting sunlight slip through in soft rays as they reached the center of Red Creek. Another unexpected sight awaited them. Chief Tahoma stood there, rain droplets on his shoulders, his people behind him. He must have followed the storm to make sure Allah was safe. Allah stepped forward. Father, I am well. The chief looked at her, then at Elias. Something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not disappointment, but quiet realization. You chose to come here, the chief said to her softly. Yes, Allah replied. And he did not ask you, the chief said, looking at Elias. Elias shook his head. No, I didn't. Chief Tahoma studied him with deep respect. You were right yesterday, he said. Allah must choose her own life. Not me. Not tradition. Not a gift. Allah held her breath, waiting. Chief Tahoma stepped aside. Her path is hers now. Those simple words carried the force of a heavy door opening, a door Ayla had never been allowed to walk through before. Elias didn't speak. He didn't want to influence anything. He only nodded respectfully. Ayla's eyes softened. She looked at the chief, then at Elias, then at the sky clearing above. Her journey was no longer bound by custom. Now it was hers. And though Elias didn't know it yet, this freedom would connect their lives in ways neither of them had imagined. The day ended with silence. Soft wind, and a feeling that something important had begun, something deeper than gratitude. Stronger than duty and gentler than words could explain. The next morning rose quiet and soft over Red Creek. After the storm, the town looked washed clean. Puddles shone like small mirrors in the sunlight, and the horses shook the water from their manes as the day warmed. Elias Carter stepped outside the stable and breathed in the fresh air. Something about the morning felt peaceful. Yet full of questions he had not answered the night before, he kept thinking about Ayla, how she chose to visit him, how she worked beside him in the storm, how she looked when Chief Tahoma declared her future belonged to her alone. Elias respected that more than anything. He didn't want to guide her choices. He didn't want to confuse her. But he couldn't pretend he felt nothing. The connection between them had grown quietly, naturally, like a plant finding sunlight. As he fed the horses, he reminded himself to stay patient. Ayla needed time to choose her steps, and he would never push her toward any decision. He didn't know that Ayla was already awake. Ayla walking toward the stable. She arrived silently, her soft steps blending with the quiet morning. She watched Elias for a moment, how he spoke gently to the horses, how carefully he handled every task, how his calm presence made the stable feel safer and warmer. "Good morning," she said in her gentle voice. Elias turned with a small smile. "Good morning. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. Elias felt a flutter of concern. "Is everything all right?" Ayla nodded but hesitated. "I needed to think, and I needed to talk to you." Elias put the feed bucket aside. "I'm here. Say whatever you want." Ayla stepped closer, folding her hands in front of her. "When the chief said my path was mine now, I felt something new. Freedom. But freedom is confusing. Many choices. Many roads." He nodded slowly. "It can be confusing, but it can also be good." Ayla looked down for a moment. "I wanted to know why you spoke for my freedom yesterday. You could have accepted me. You could have agreed to the chief's offer. Many men would have." Elias wiped his hands on a cloth and leaned gently against a post. "Because accepting you in that way wouldn't be right. You're a person with your own life, not something to be offered, not something to be traded. You deserve to choose where you go and who you trust." Ayla lifted her eyes to him. They were filled with soft emotion, gratitude, curiosity, and something deeper. "No one has said that to me before," she whispered. Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Well, maybe they should have." Ayla breathed slowly, gathering courage. "Elias, do you think I made the wrong choice coming here?" "No," he said without hesitation. "I think you came because it was your heart telling you to, and your heart deserves to be heard." Something in her expression softened. The simple words comforted her more than he realized. They walked out of the stable together, letting the morning light guide their steps. Ayla asked him questions about the town, its people, its troubles, its hopes. Elias answered everything patiently. Then he asked about her home, her traditions, her memories. Ayla spoke openly, telling him about her love for weaving, her favorite quiet places in the desert, and her dream of learning new things beyond the borders of her village. As they walked, people greeted them warmly. The baker's wife handed them fresh bread. The old sheriff nodded with quiet respect. A young boy asked Ayla if she could braid horsehair like she braided her own. Ayla laughed softly and promised to show him another day. Slowly, Ayla began to feel welcomed, not by force, not by tradition, but by kindness. By midday, they reached the small ranch on the edge of town that Elias had slowly built over the years. It wasn't much, just a wooden cabin, a fenced area for the horses, a shed full of tools, and a small garden behind the cabin. But it was peaceful, steady, and cared for with gentle hands. "This is where you live," Ayla said quietly, taking in every detail. "Yeah," Elias replied. "It's simple, but it's home." Ayla walked around slowly, touching a fence post, looking at the neat rows of vegetables, studying the small porch. She breathed deeply, as if trying to understand the feeling of the place. "It's quiet here," she said. "I like quiet. Elias replied. Alice smiled. Quiet is good. Quiet lets the heart speak. Her words made Elias look at her in a new way, not with confusion, not with hesitation, but with a calm understanding that something important was forming between them. They sat on the porch for a moment, enjoying the breeze. Ayla watched a butterfly land on a small flower near the steps. Elias, she said softly, everyone thinks you are only a cowboy, but you have a different heart. I can see it. He shook his head lightly. I'm nothing special. Ayla looked at him firmly, surprising him. You are, because you make choices with kindness, even when they are difficult. Elias didn't know how to answer. He only knew that her words warmed him more deeply than he expected. As the afternoon sun grew lower, Ayla looked toward the distant hills thoughtfully. I must decide soon, she said. Whether I return home or stay here. Elias swallowed quietly. This was the moment he had feared, not because he wanted to control her choice, but because he knew her decision could change everything. You should choose what feels right, he said gently, not what anyone expects. Alice studied his face for a long time. Her eyes were deep, steady, searching. You do not tell me to stay, she said. No, Elias answered, because the choice must be yours. Ayla stood slowly, walked a few steps toward the fence, and let her fingers trace the wood grain. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the wind. When she turned back to Elias, her decision was clear. I want to stay, she said softly. Elias froze. I want to stay in this town, Ayla continued. I want to learn to help, to build something new. Not because I was offered to anyone, not because someone decided for me. I want to stay because this place feels right, and because you made me feel safe to choose. Elias stood up slowly, unsure if he had heard her correctly. Ayla, you don't have to stay because of me. She took a steady step toward him. I am not staying because I must. I am staying because I choose to stand beside the person who treated me with honesty and respect. Her words were simple, but they held more meaning than anything he had heard in a long time. Elias felt something inside him shift a quiet joy, deep and steady. Before he could respond, the sound of hooves approached. Chief Tahoma and 2 elders arrived, riding calmly toward the ranch. Elias tensed slightly, unsure of the chief's reaction. Ayla walked forward to meet her father. I have chosen, she said, standing tall. I wish to stay, not as a gift, not as a duty, but because this place calls me, and because this man values my freedom. Chief Tahoma looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he turned to Elias. Your refusal yesterday, the chief said slowly, was not a rejection. It was respect. A rare thing. Elias said nothing. He didn't want to interfere, the chief continued. Ayla stays because she chooses, and I respect her choice. Relief washed through Elias like a warm wave. The chief added, I leave her future in her own hands now. Treat her with the same honor you showed yesterday. I will, Elias said quietly. Ayla stepped beside Elias, her expression calm and certain. The chief nodded once, satisfied. Then he and the elders rode back toward the hills. Leaving Ayla and Elias standing together in the golden light, Ayla looked at him, her eyes full of quiet hope. Are you all right? She asked gently. Elias exhaled slowly. I am now. They walked back to the porch together. The sky deepened into warm oranges and soft purples, painting the land with peaceful colors. Ayla sat close beside him, their shoulders almost touching but not quite. Neither of them rushed. Neither forced anything. They simply let the quiet speak. Ayla finally whispered, Maybe this is a beginning. Elias smiled faintly. It feels like one. And so, on a calm evening in Red Creek, with the desert wind carrying the soft scent of earth and new possibilities, a quiet cowboy and a brave Apache woman started building a future not given. Not forced, not bound by tradition, but chosen freely, step by step. With honesty and respect, people in the region would talk about that stormy day for years. But more than the shootout, they remembered something else. How a cowboy answered an offer with respect. How a woman claimed her freedom, and how 2 different worlds met and created something gentle and true.